So, week 1, we are going to start today. This is an actual class day. I know other professors let you early, I don't. But we will have a break, so don't worry. We're going to start with my introduction. We've already done that, and we're going to cover some of the bigger themes. Week 2, we're going to look at Europe during the 17th and 18th century. This is a Eurocentric class. Okay, I apologize for that. We will look at elements of the history of other parts of the world before European colonialism, but because the class essentially focuses mainly on the activity and agency of great powers in the system, and because most of those great powers were European in the era of the modern era, this class will tend to be a bit focused on Europe. There's another reason for this. The modern international system has essentially been built on the basis of the ideas of the European state system in the 17th and 18th century, what is called the Westphalian system, so a lot of people will question about it. And while Europe no more is the most important place in the world, by any question, its history casts a shadow on the history of the rest of the world. So, while we will definitely talk about events happening in Africa, in the Americas, in Asia, before the before they were subjected to European imperialism, most of that class is going to focus on what happens in Europe and how that affects how European states behave towards politics outside of Europe. And then obviously we can also talk about the collapse of the European imperialism system, its replacement by the modern state system, and so on and so on. If you want a more specific class on the diplomatic history of places outside of Europe, I can offer electives in the future. You just have to ask for them. If you're interested in reading more about the diplomatic history of areas outside Europe, some of the readings in the list can help you. You can also talk with me. But again, I have to apologize, but I have to be clear. Most of the class is going to focus on European people killing each other and then killing other people. Week 3, we're going to look at an important point, which is the transformation that happened with the Vienna Congress system. For example, when was the term great powers first used? You know, we talk about the big powers, we talk about the great powers. In Ottoman history, they are omnipresent after the Tanzimat era. But until the Vienna Congress, that term was not actually used in official diplomacy. The first time that officially, in a legal document of international law, the term great powers was used was in the Vienna system, in the start of the Vienna system. And that's where we get to the idea of essentially a pluralistic international system where you essentially have a small group of states, the great powers, that lead or dominate, if you want, a system made up of sovereign, technically, states. Okay? Then we go through the history of this system, okay? Until its collapse with the Crimean War, and then the series of unification wars in Western Europe, the Italian unification war, and the German unification wars. Then the attempt to recreate a system of stability, especially under German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. His failure, the outbreak of World War I, the actual conduct of the war and its aftermath, the Versailles Treaty, plus the various treaties that came out of that collapse of that system. The 20 years crisis, as E.H. Carr, an English historian, called it, the interwar period. We're going to talk about the factors that were promoting stability and the factors that were undermining stability, and why it failed when we got World War II. Of course, World War II and its aftermath. And then the Cold War, and we're going to look at the early era of the Cold War, Then the high-pitched, the 1950s to 1970s, example, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then its stability and how it ended. And we're going to finish this with a small discussion about the New World Order, the post-Cold War order. And we're going to stop on 9/11, okay? This is a diplomatic history class. We will stop on 9/11, 2001. How many of you like Game of Thrones? Vikings. Dinilis. Okay? Maduro likes Dinilis. But if you like those kind of political stories with warfare and stuff like that, you're gonna get this in this class. Pretty much this whole class is one huge Game of Thrones. Without the sexiness. We have to keep it PG. So you will find out that sex does have political power and does play its role. But pretty much we're gonna look at betrayals, great battles, massive wars, great politicians, puny politicians. There will be moments where you hold your hands and say, how the hell did this person ever think this is going to work out? Now that one's going to say, yes, it finally worked out. We're going to meet crazy warlord types, Jon Snows essentially, who don't get resurrected, they just die permanently. And we're going to meet Littlefinger types. And we're going to say Littlefinger types tend to win. There's no Arya Stark and stuff like that around here. I don't want to spoil anything more for you guys. So, let's talk about the class a bit. And then we're going to take a break at 11:30 for 20 minutes so you can drink some coffee. Everybody hates everybody in the world. Okay? What is diplomacy? Okay? Why are we taking this class? Why is this class important? Why are we forcing you to take this class? We're not even giving you an option. We're like, you're going to take this class. Okay? Why is diplomacy important? Do you feel right now that the Turkish government has a very good diplomacy? Let me give you an example of diplomacy. Recently, there was an agreement between the government of Turkey and the government of Russia about Idlib. Now, what did that agreement avert? What was going to happen in Idlib? They were going to all eat ice cream. It was going to be a huge rave party. What was going to happen in Idlib?
The area without guns created.
Okay, so why was that area created? What was they trying to avert?
To maintain lesser conflict.
Okay, but what was the alternative? What was going to happen? Russia and Syria would have attacked the rebel stronghold in Idlib and crushed it. Chechnya #2. Right? That was what they promised. Okay? Now, the government of Turkey has good relations with the rebels and doesn't like the idea of seeing them crushed. Now, if someone is going to beat the crap out of your friends, how can you stop them from doing that? I come and I see your friends and I say, I'm going to beat your friends up, man. I'm going to make them all spit down. They're going to be eating their food from a straw for the rest of their lives. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Can I be quiet and let me do it? I'm like, Pat, look, I'm beating your friend up. Look, I'm thinking about you right now as I'm beating your friend up. What do you think about your friend? Hopefully you'll try to stop me. Scratch me in the face or I don't know, right? Kick me in the whatever. Or you create a situation where I can't hit your friends. So the option is either I go to you and tell you, if you attack Idlib, we're going to have a war. Or I create an agreement with you. Okay, that gives you something for nothing. Diplomacy is a fine art of attaining goals without necessarily having to pay the iron price, to use another Game of Thrones thing, without necessarily having to expend human lives and treasure fighting. So usually when we think of diplomacy as statesmanship in the service of peace.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right. Let me ask a few questions, Mr. President, about America's place in the world and how you see it and how you'd like to move it if you can in the last couple of years.
The videos are a bit bad.
We're speaking at a moment after you've announced that you're restoring diplomatic relations with Cuba. You want to reopen an embassy there. Is there any scenario under which you can envision in your final 2 years opening a U.S. embassy in Tehran?
I never say never.
I miss him.
But I think these things have to go both steps. Cuba is a circumstance in which for 50 years we had done the same thing over and over again and there hadn't been any change. And the question was, should we try something different with a relatively tiny country that doesn't pose any significant threat to us or our allies? I was asked very early in my presidential race back in 2007, would I meet with these various rogue regimes? And what I said then remains true. If I thought it advances American interests, yes, I believe in diplomacy, I believe in dialogue, I believe in engagement. But in order for us to, I think, open that aperture with respect to Iran, we have to get this nuclear issue resolved, and there's a chance to do it. And the question is going to be whether or not Iran is willing to seize it. I think there are elements inside of Iran that recognize the opportunity and want to take it. But I think there are some hardliners inside of Iran that are threatened by a resolution of this because they're so invested politically and emotionally in being anti-American or anti-Western that it's frightening for them to open themselves up to the world in this way.
Okay. But to be fair to the current President of the United States of America, he also used diplomatic means to get an agreement with North Korea. So many times we hear of diplomacy as statesmanship in the service of peace. We use diplomacy to get what we want in a peaceful way and to create an environment where peace continues. But if you ask my anarchist friends, or if you ask some other thinkers, for example, my old professor John Mearsheimer, diplomacy is also a tool of power politics, of Machtpolitik. And essentially you use diplomacy in order to bring about conditions that maximize your chance of coercing the other side to surrender or winning the war if it starts. When we go and see Otto von Bismarck, we will see him using both facets of diplomacy. And a classical example here is ultimatums, which are part of diplomatic discourse. So here we have President George W. Bush giving an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing.
So, both ultimatums and agreements are part of diplomacy. This has led a lot to consider diplomacy less than honorable activity. Indeed, if you go to my syllabus, And you look on the very first page, at the very top, I have the dictionary entry for diplomacy from Ambrose Bierce, Devil's Dictionary. This was an American writer that lived during the 1870s, 1860s, and he had a very cynical view on life. He defines diplomacy as the patriotic art of lying for one's country. A diplomat is a liar. Oh, I have friends diplomats, they would be very angry if I call them a liar. But you know, if you watch Game of Thrones, who is the biggest diplomat in there? Tyrion Lannister and Littlefinger. Anybody consider Littlefinger a hero? I don't think so. Most people tend to think like Ned Stark thinks.
No leaders.
My Lord Protector.
The king has no true born sons. Joffrey and Tommen, the Jaime Lannister's bastards.
So, when the king
The
dies,
throne passes to his brother, Lord Stannis.
so it would seem. Unless...
There is no unless. He is the rightful heir. Nothing can change that.
And he cannot take the throne without your help. You will be wise to deny it to him, and to make sure Joffrey succeeds.
Do you have a shred of honor?
You are now hand of the king and protector of the realm. All of the power is yours. You need only reach out and take it. Make peace with the Lannisters. Release the imp. Wed your daughter to Joffrey. We've plenty of time to get rid of Stannis, and if Joffrey seems likely to cause problems when he comes into his throne, we simply reveal his little secret and seat Lord Renly there instead. You'll need someone to share these burdens, I assure you. My price would be modest.
What you suggest is treason.
Only if we lose.
Make peace with the Lannisters, you say. And the people who try to murder my boy.
We only make peace with our enemies, my lord. That's why it's called making peace.
No. I won't do it.
So it will be Stannis
And war, there is no other choice. He is the heir.
So why did you...
So, let's make peace. No, it is a dishonorable thing. So maybe it is the tool of scoundrels, and you will actually see that in the early era of the modern diplomatic system, in the Renaissance, yes, diplomats were pretty much scoundrels. I mean, you were an official spy. People expected you to act as a spy. That's why when countries declared war on each other, they usually arrested their diplomats. The Ottoman Empire's historical tradition was whenever there was war with Austria or Venice, the first thing that happened is the Venetian ambassador or the Austrian ambassador will be put in one of the nice ridicules and wait until the war is over. Only much later, in the 18th and 19th century, did the tradition of treatment towards diplomats change, and from essentially official spies, they became something closer to representatives of the nation, and thus had to act a big honorably. But as we're going to see, a lot of diplomacy is about foolish people doing foolish things. And sometimes these very foolish people are very, very powerful.
Hello? Hello, Dimitri. Listen, I can't hear too well. Do you suppose you could turn the music down just a little? Oh, that's much better. Yeah. Yeah. Fine, I can hear you now, Dimitri. Clear and plain and coming through fine. I'm coming through fine too, eh? Good, then Well then, as you say, we're both coming through fine. Good. Well, it's good that you're fine and I'm fine. I agree with you, it's great to be fine. Now then, Dimitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb. The bomb, Dimitri. The hydrogen bomb. Well, now, what happened is, one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dimitri. Let me finish, Dimitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it? Can you imagine how I feel about it, Dimitri? Why do you think I'm calling you? Just to say hello? Of course I like to speak to you. Of course I like to say hello. Not now, but any time, Dimitri. I'm just calling up to tell you something terrible has happened. It's a friendly call. Of course it's a friendly call. Listen, if it wasn't friendly, you probably wouldn't have even got it. They will not reach their targets for at least another hour. I am positive, Dimitri. Listen, I've been all over this with your ambassador. It is not a trick. Well, I'll tell you. We'd like to give your air staff a complete rundown on the targets, the flight plans, and the defensive systems of the planes. Yes, I mean, if we're unable to recall the planes, then I'd say that, we're just going to have to help you destroy them, Dimitri. I know there are ones. All right, well, listen, now who should we call? Who should we call, Dimitri? The people, sorry, you faded away there. The People's Central Air Defense Headquarters. Where is that, Dimitri? In Omsk, right? Yes. Oh, you'll call them first, will you? Uh-huh. Listen, do you happen to have the phone number on you, Dimitri? What? I see. Just ask for Omsk information. I'm sorry too, Dimitri. I'm very sorry. All right, you're sorrier than I am. But I am sorry as well. I am as sorry as you are, Dimitri. Don't say that you're more sorry than I am, because I'm capable of being just as sorry as you are. So we're both sorry, all right? All right. Yes, he's right here. Yes, he wants to talk to you. Just a second. Товарищ председатель, говорит Санский. Да. Да.
Okay, so that can actually happen. One of the papers we are going to do for the extra reading was written by one of my friends who's a historian, Jeffrey Green, and he actually talks about the telephone communications before the first Iraq War between George H. Bush and various political leaders, including the Prime Minister of Turkey, the President of France, and if you read it, you will notice that the President of the United States of America uses very colorful language, especially for some of the European politicians. Okay, so we talked about diplomacy as a tool of scoundrels, as a tool for making peace, as a tool for statesmen. But you know what? Let's take a step back. Let's go back to the elementary element of political science and international relations. What is politics? Those of you who have taken classes in the past might remember we defined that. But what is politics? Beyond being either very boring for people your age or extremely terrifying, especially if you are part of certain groups that are not very popular right now with those in power. But what is politics? Now, in your mind, there's no right or wrong answer here. I'll give you my answer in a way, but what's politics for you? I use the word politics. What is it?
It's actually everything.
It's everything? Okay, that's one way to say it.
The interaction between states, behavior between people is also politics.
Yeah. That's one way to see it. And there are many of my friends who are leftists who will definitely say politics is everywhere. And I'll then go like, no, leave something alone. No, everything will be judged. But that's one way to see it. Someone else? What is politics? But you know, if it is everything, then the term kind of becomes meaningless, right? If something means everything, then it ends up meaning nothing. So why then use the word politics and not just say, what is life, right? I don't know. Do we consider that life and politics is one and the same? Not yet, maybe. Maybe we should, but I don't think yet. So if politics is not necessarily everything, maybe it is everything, but perhaps we haven't accepted it yet. What else can it be? And what is politics for you guys? A very boring topic, Professor. That's what politics is. Okay. Actually, here's the problem. I agree, politics can be very, very, very boring. But as Comrade Trotsky used to say, or I'm paraphrasing him, anyway, who cares? You might not care about politics, but politics most certainly cares about you. And he meant essentially, you might not care about what the people in power do, but rest assured, what they do is going to affect you sooner or later. In this country, you can be imprisoned for political decisions. You can be killed for political decisions, not necessarily just by the government, but also by the opposition, especially by organizations that are using violence to attain goals. You could lose your passport, or you could make a lot of money and gain glory and honor, depending on politics. Now, the scientific, or let's more correctly say, scholarly definition of politics we're going to use here is that politics is who gets what, when, and how. Who gets what, when, and how. It is a very classical definition of politics, initially made in the study of American politics, but it's very useful, okay? Because it tells us something. First of all, what is politics about? From this definition. Who gets what, when, and how. Politics is about people, persons, like you, okay? And it's about getting something, okay? Getting what, right? Now, the definition does not define the who, and the definition does not define the what. Why? Why not? Why doesn't it define? Why doesn't it say politics is which political party is going to get power in parliament? Or politics is whether men or women will get more money in salaries? Or politics is whether Greece or Turkey will have bigger control over the Aegean Sea? Or politics is whether people whose skin color is dark are going to get killed or not. Whether people of a certain religion are going to be imprisoned or not. See? The reason why the definition doesn't tell us the who and the what is because the who and the what are also political decisions. Now, here's the thing. Why do we care who gets what? Why do we care who gets what? If there is enough what for everybody, do we care who gets it? If me getting X amount of what doesn't deny you that same amount, do you care if I get it? I mean, we live in a world where chocolate is unending, infinite. If I drink 5 gallons of chocolate, does it affect you drinking 5 gallons of chocolate? No. Do you care if I drink 5 gallons of chocolate? Maybe if you don't want me to die or something, but you don't, right? Go for it. So, what do we understand from this very bad analogy about the what of politics? And why we do care about who gets what?
How the resources are limited.
Yes. The what of politics is scarce. It is those things where if I take part of it, you lose it. No one else can use it. And the what can be material scarce things. Food. There is not limitless food in the world. If I eat a chicken, you're not going to be able to eat that chicken. If there is 5 pieces of bread left, and we're both hungry, and I eat those 5 pieces of bread, you're going hungry. Okay? I am literally denying you substance. Can be housing. Not all of us can live in massive 10-room mansions. And you can't build that many 10-room mansions throughout the world. So if we do decide to permit 10-room mansions, which is one political decision, then you have to figure out who gets to live in the 10-room mansions and who doesn't. Okay? But it can also be immaterial things. Respect. Can't say, if all of us are equal in respect, then no one is special. People care about being special. We care about our identity. We want to be someone a bit unique. So we want to stand out in some things. So who gets to stand out? Who gets to be honored? Who gets to be given bravos? Can be a scarce resource. Not all singers can win Emmys at the same time. Not all actors can win Oscars at the same time. Not everybody can get an A at the same time, because if we did, well, the meaning of an Oscar or an Emmy or an A will be meaningless. Now you ask me, why should we have these differentiations? And that also is a political decision. That is a question of politics. Are we going to have differentiations? If we do have differentiations, who will get those differentiations? And whether those immaterial scarce resources, love, for example, we like to say we can love everybody equally. A mother's love is unending for her children. The reality of the matter is we are physical beings. Our psychology is tied to our bodies. Fatigue and other things can sap how much love we give. Which means that sometimes one of the kids might get more love than the others. So even love can be a scarce resource. And when those scarce resources are tied to material resources, the child that gets more love, gets more attention, better clothes, more food. Yeah. And you care about politics. So politics is about how we decide to distribute scarce resources between competing demands. Those of you who took political theory with me last year, remember that we were talking about Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan? Was the book with a huge multi-man human. What did Hobbes say? He said that the problem with humanity is that hope is unlimited. There is no limit to our hopes. There is no limit to our dreams. There is no limit to what we may want. But the means to, fixing, bringing about those hopes and dreams into reality, they are finite. So you as an individual have to decide which of your hopes you're going to sacrifice in order to attain other ones with the finite means in your disposal. And as a society, we have to decide whose hopes deserve being realized and how much, and whose hopes don't. That is where politics come from. And there is one resource that even if tomorrow we had socialism, which essentially is a system in which hopes and means are calibrated in a way that everybody can maximize what they get, even in such a system there is one resource that will always be scarce. Time. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not have infinite time. None of us have. We have very finite time at our availability. Perhaps once that time runs out, we get a second chance for reincarnation. But you're not going to be reincarnated into your current persona. So in your current world, in this world where you are who you are, you don't have infinite time. And that is the primordial political decision. How are you going to spend your time? So, politics is about deciding who gets what, when, and how. Who gets part of those scarce resources. So if that is politics in general, what is international politics then? Who's the who in international politics? When I use the word international politics, who am I talking about? Okay, states, okay, organized societies. And organized societies are nothing more than systems that have already provided one possible answer for those questions, okay? And those non-state actors, ranging from individuals and including those who would like to be states, that are making demands about resources at international level. Okay? So international politics is the question of who gets what, when, and how within a system of anarchy. In another name, a system where there is no higher authority that can adjudicate those decisions. That cannot say, you're going to spend 3 hours of your time reading, you're going to spend 2 hours of your time having fun, and you're going to spend 1 hour of your time tilling the land today. And that's it. But why? Well, I'm your natural overlord, feudal lord, and that's what I decide. Or, hey, we'll vote about it, and we decided that way. In domestic politics, we have systems for making these decisions, and we have police and courts to enforce those decisions. In international politics, there is no police. there is no court. If you make a decision and you want to enforce it, either you will have to persuade everybody else to work with you, diplomacy, or you'll have to impose it by passing them around, war. Any questions?
How about United Nations?
The United Nations is really cool. I really like the United Nations. The United Nations is not a government.
I know, but they can sometimes force states to behave.
Well, they can punish states, careful, they can punish states. They can all agree together to, and ultimately, if they wanted, they could declare war on a specific state and beat the crap out of it. But that only happens as long as one of the great powers doesn't veto it. So the United Nations is not a government. It is an institution that helps answer the questions of who gets what and how, but it doesn't adjudicate it. Ultimately, for example, if Russia doesn't want war crimes tribunals against the government of Bashar al-Assad, they're not going to happen. And despite all of the rhetoric coming from the Turkish government, all the rhetoric coming from the American government, fundamentally, Assad is a legitimate government of Syria for the United Nations. I don't consider it a legitimate government, I'm just telling you the facts of international law. So the United Nations has as much power as the members of that organization want to give it, and as little power as they decide to deny it. Now, let's be frank. Whether you're talking about international politics or domestic politics, force is the ultimate adjudicator. Legitimacy and force are unquestionable. I mean, the court and the police here in Turkey only have as much power as people want to give it. If tomorrow 80 million or 90, 70 million Turks decide to rebel, kaboom, okay? And actually, we know from scholarly work that studies rebellions that you don't even need 80 million people. As long as 10 to 15% of the population are actively resisting the government, most government systems will collapse and have to change. They work because we are willing to tolerate them mistreating us, because in the long term we think that's for our best. That's legitimacy. Ultimate legitimacy is I'm willing to let you mistreat me right now because I think that in the long term that's good. I'm willing to let you tax me. I'm willing to let you arrest me because I think that the system, if it exists, it's a good thing long term for me. That doesn't exist in international politics. The United Nations doesn't have popular legitimacy. Most people in most countries in the world first have the loyalty to their country or their government or their party rather than the Secretary General of the United Nations. So that's governance, make no mistake. This is an article in the sense that there is no supreme authority that is sovereign. It's not an article in the sense that there's no government. You don't need a supreme authority to have a government. Government is all about getting together and working together. Having that sovereign authority makes it easier to have government, but you don't need it. This sounds very anarchist, but it is true. So don't mistake governance necessarily with order, with government. These are two different things. And in the international system there is governance, and diplomacy is part of the governance. Now, this is then what diplomacy is. It is the means that sovereign entities that do not accept the right of anybody else to tell them how to behave. And ultimately that's what sovereignty is. That I do not accept anyone else to tell me how to behave. Doesn't mean I refuse to work together with others. It doesn't mean that at points I might even say, you can make this decision for me, but it means that I have the ultimate authority to say, you know what, stop. You made enough decisions for me, from now on I'm making those decisions. Or to say, well, I don't want to play with you guys. Okay? So it's about how sovereign entities try to answer the questions of who gets what. Well, it includes negotiation, trying to persuade you on principle, or tit-for-tat agreement to agree on something that you would not normally agree to. Commerce. You know, one of the easiest ways to decide how we divide a scarce thing, who is willing to pay more money for it? That's what commerce is. It's a way to resolve the question of who gets what, when, and how on the basis of supply and demand. Coercion. I think you should move your ships out of the Black Sea. Not trying to fight you, I'm just pointing out to you that if we fight, I'm bigger, you're smaller, I know martial arts, you don't, ain't gonna end up. So accommodate yourself willingly to me. Violence is part of diplomacy and law, the use of legal principles to decide issues. Really, the only thing that is excluded from diplomacy is total war, because in total war, the end result is the nullification of the other actor. And if you nullify the other actor, if you destroy them, if you exterminate them, you don't care about the future, because that's it. The story is over. Diplomacy exists, and international politics exists where we expect to have to interact with each other in the future, where we have to talk with each other in the future. Today we might fight, but I won't kill you, which means in the future I have to find a way to walk with you, work with you, talk with you, and so on. If I exterminate you as an actor, that's it, that's over. So total war is not diplomacy. Once you enter the world of total war, where the goal is to physically, institutionally exterminate another state totally from the face of the earth, you're not anymore in a diplomatic world. You're not in international politics. You have entered into what is the actual state of nature, as Hobbes would say. Any questions? Now, it does not include things like this. Not a very good video. So, let me tell you what happened here. Okay, what happened here was this. Jean-Claude Juncker, who was the president of the Commission of the European Union, is meeting Viktor Orbán, the Prime Minister of Hungary, in a public space. And when he sees Orbán coming, he says, oh, look, the dictator is coming. That's not very diplomatic. I don't like Viktor Orbán. I don't like his politics, but he has been voted into power. So, you know, you are not acting very diplomatically as the president of a major European institution when you call one of the leaders of the member states a dictator publicly in front of everybody. But of course, Jean-Claude is such a charismatic, funny individual. Orbán was like, okay, he's just joking. How are you, Jean-Claude? But that's not diplomacy. Now, so the barbs, the jokes, the fuming that comes out and makes up a lot of the news you read about diplomacy, that's not diplomacy, that's just theater. It's acting. It would be very boring if the politicians all acted completely clinical with each other. Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about this. Yes, indeed, sir. Let us sit down and talk about it. Yes, ma'am. And here's the agreement, clack, 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 end of story. We like this kind of farms. Now, what's diplomatic history then? Diplomatic history is the study of the events that form modern international system. When we mean modern international system, we mean about this pluralist system of asymmetrical equality. Technically speaking, every country in the world is equal and sovereign, legally speaking. Whether you're a tiny country like Mauritius or Andorra, or whether you are a continent-spanning state like the Russian Federation, you're supposed to behave to each other as equals. Okay? This was not the case, as we're going to see, before the development of the system. But That is the affect, that is the image of the system. The reality of the system, though, is that not everybody is equally powerful. And we have a system that tries to manage what it promises to its members, equality, with the reality of its membership, which is, I don't care how equal Andorra is, the United States of America is much more powerful. Okay? So it's about managing hegemony, if you want. The reality of asymmetry and equality in a way that doesn't destroy international relations. So, it tends to focus on the wars and treaties that underpin international relations. It tends to be a bit old-fashioned history. The new history is interesting, the social history. We care about you. You are the protagonists in the new history. It's much more interesting to read about how teenagers like you, or young adults like you, live their lives in the 17th and 18th and 19th and 20th century. Now this is more old-fashioned history, and I'm an old-fashioned person. It's about the political leaders, the wars, not the people's history. Don't make a mistake. People are the protagonists. But here we care more about how the powerful acted, not necessarily how the powerless try to avoid becoming pawns in their games. And it really begins in Europe and then becomes global. This international system was the European international system until 1945. It was with the end of the World War II that European states had to give the treatment that they were giving each other, that we are sovereign equal states legally, to non-European states. And nowadays, everybody behaves like that. So it has become a global system with changes. But it is good for us to start from the European story. And as I said, it started in Europe, and via globalization, imperialism and decolonization, it became global. And the alternative systems to this were either universal empires, the Chinese Empire, the Islamic Empire. They were universal. A universal empire is essentially this view, that there exist two worlds on this planet. The world of the empire, Middle Kingdom for the Chinese, the House of Islam for the Caliphate, okay? For the Orthodox Christians, the Eastern Roman cosmos theory, okay? Cosmos system, world system, and beyond those borders are the barbarians. And sometimes the universe expands and includes the barbarians in, and sometimes the universe retracts. But we, the civilized people, are never equal to them, barbarians. Middle Kingdom is always superior to the barbarians. Islam is always superior to the Heths. The Roman world system will always civilize the barbarians. There is a system of inequality there that is legal. Okay? There were attempts at pluralist systems outside of Europe. In the Indian subcontinent in the 17th century, we will learn about it when the Mughal Empire fell. And in Africa and in southern areas, but they were unstable. They were not able to survive once the Europeans arrived. And we will understand by that. Or they left very little record. The native peoples of the Americas, more correctly, the first people to go to the American continent, had their tribes, they had their polities, they had their organizations. They were not running around like a bunch of happy hippies. They had their wars, they had their peace, they had their systems of law and everything, but because most of them did not have written language, the European colonization had as a result of wiping it out from our history. It's lost. Only those elements that were written down by the colonial powers remain to us, like the Iroquois Confederacy. So that's why Europe becomes important, because they won. They won and they were able to stamp the planet with it. It doesn't have to be moral, they should have won or they shouldn't have won. That's a debate for other classes. They just won. And we're going to learn why, partly in the class. And that's why we focus on them. Now, when it comes to diplomatic history, there are, I'll give you a 10-minute break at 12:30, so don't worry. Get a break, get more energy. There are competing visions of the history of diplomacy, okay? There are the realist, the Whig, the Marxist, and more recently the Ushu paradigm, which I am part of. Now, in the realist idea, diplomatic history is really a circular story, okay? There's no real change. Since the 17th century, when there was a change from the universal Christian world system to the pluralist system of sovereign states, the history of the world has followed a very familiar and repeating pattern, which is there's a crisis, the crisis is resolved by war, the war leads to a new version of the anarchical order first created in Westphalia. Okay? And that's it. That's our future. Until material conditions magically change in a way, this is the history of the world for the next millennia. Okay? Another interpretation is the Whig interpretation. Now, today we will call this the liberal progressive interpretation. Okay? The Whigs used to be the first liberals. And their view is that diplomatic history since the creation of the Westphalian system has been a sequence of events whose end result has been an ascending order of dominance by the classical liberal trinity of political, economic, and spiritual liberty defeating authoritarian threats. In another way, history has an upward swing in which more and more and more liberty is becoming dominant in the world. By that I mean liberal politics, usually liberal democratic, liberal economics, usually free market or at most social democratic left liberal economics, and spiritual liberty, which they usually mean secularization, laicity. Okay? And essentially the history is a series where authoritarian threats rise to destroy this liberal project. Whether those threats are King Louis XIV, the Sun King, or Napoleon Bonaparte, or the German Empire in World War I, or the Nazis, or the Soviets, or today perhaps the illiberal regimes, the illiberal majoritarian regimes like Viktor Orban's Hungary, Turkey in the eyes of many under the current president, or populists. They rise, there's a war, they're defeated by the liberal powers who then extend liberty to the barrel of a gun. This is a very classical view. It has been now a bit got away from the study of diplomacy, but it is a very powerful view in the views of people, especially decision makers. The great enemy of the Whigs are, of course, the Marxists. Okay? And for the Marxists, diplomatic history is about a clash between the dominant classes and the exploitation of the weak. It's a story about competition between either the aristocrats or the bourgeois, and how that competition has also exploited the working class or the peasants or the serfs or the slaves within it. Crises play a very big role, and because crises are the opportunities for the exploited to rise up, overthrow the systems of exploitation, and move slowly closer to the socialist ideal. Also, the diplomatic history of Marxist states is very important. But essentially, like the Whigs, they believe that diplomatic history is a process of ascension, but where for the Whigs it's a process of ascension towards a liberal global order. Francis Fukuyama characteristically wrote the end of history when the Cold War fell, because he thought, oh, all other ideologies are defeated, so everybody's going to be a liberal. he published a new article now where he says, well, the end of history is not yet here because of identity. We'll have to correct it. For the Marxists, the end result is the great proletarian revolution and a global Marxist system. Finally, the issue paradigm is more of a political science view, and diplomatic history in the issue paradigm is about the rise and resolution of issues between polities. Essentially, people have problems. How they fix those problems is important. And what happens is, because of the longevity of the system, our ability to fix problems has become more sophisticated. That's why, despite what you think from the news, the use of force between states is becoming rarer and rarer. That's not because governments are pacific, but it's become because after 300 years of history of killing each other, they have become very good at finding alternatives to killing each other. Those are the four main schools. Now, the book a general look about the state of diplomacy today. Now, I'm using here the view of Henry Kissinger, who was the United States Secretary of State and National Security Advisor during the Ford and Nixon administrations. He also is kinda of a political criminal, since he supported a lot of dictatorial coups during the Cold War, especially with the case of Chile and Allende. But on the other hand, he is one of the most important living statesmen or political leaders who have a lot of experience about diplomacy, and he was a professor. Before he became a diplomat and got into politics and committed crimes, he was like your professor, teaching. So if in the future I do anything evil, people will come and ask you questions. How was he as a professor? Now, Kissinger says that from the 17th to the 20th century, the international system, the international political system, was a balance of power system. What does balance of power mean? Well, no one has a straight answer. What is balanced for one state probably is hegemonic for the other, and there is a whole stable of scholars who have built their careers debating the question of what a balance of power is. But if we think of balance of power as a system in which multiple countries have the ability to veto de facto. De facto means in actuality, de jure means legally, but de facto, since we're in a system of sovereign equality de jure, the decisions of other states, then yes, this era was characterized by more or less countries that were less or more equal in their capabilities and influence in the international system. Now, the Cold War era, roughly the era from the end of the World War II to the fall of the Soviet Union, was a bipolar hegemonic system with the United States dominant. You can call it an asymmetrical hegemonic bipolar system. Essentially, there were two powers that were extremely powerful, more powerful than any other state in the world, and with the ability to veto de facto the decisions of other states, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. And they were kinda able to contain each other, but the United States of America was stronger influence-wise and capability-wise. It wasn't exactly that the Soviet Union was exactly equal to the US. It was simply the Soviet Union was strong enough to deter the US from using its power to change the system to essentially unipolar hegemonic system. The post-Cold War era is interesting. Kissinger raises the question of whether it is a new balance of power system. Others have called it a unipolar system. One way to understand this is by essentially separating the concepts of polarity, which is how many powerful states are in the system, from the concept of governance, hegemony, anarchy, and so on. So, right now, there is no question that the United States of America is still the strongest state in the world. Despite the best efforts of American politicians and presidents to provide an image of incompetence, stupidity, accommodationism, we're all friends. When it comes to the hard material facts, money and military power, the United States of America is still the strongest state in the world. So we are in a unipolar system. France, the United Kingdom, Russia, China even can make trouble for the US on a local level. The US can essentially transport its military might to any of these countries and destroy it if it wanted. It wouldn't necessarily win, but it will destroy the enemy state. The US can still project power anywhere in the world. It is still the only state in the world that can land mass armies in a foreign hostile shore. Russia has been projecting power to places like Syria, but in Syria it has a friendly state that already makes things easy. China projects economic power, especially in Africa. Chinese come and say, hey, don't take evil white people's money. You can have our red cobra money. And we'll build stuff with you, and of course it will do things. But let me put it this way. The greatest military naval base of China in Africa is at Djibouti, and it is shared with France and the United States of America. So they're all kind of co-sharing the same naval base. No one is sharing Diego Garcia with the United States. That's its base. But the fact that one power is more powerful than the other powers when it comes to material indicators doesn't necessarily mean that the system is hegemonic. For many reasons, a lot of them having to do with politics, with willpower, with ideology, such a powerful state might decide not to use its power to build a hegemonic system. It might decide that it's better if the world still works through balance of power system or a sovereign equality system rather than a system where the United States officially tells everybody, yeah, legally I'm the top. I'm the high adjudicator. If you've got a problem, Greece and Turkey, I'll decide it for you. And you will obey my decision, because if you don't do, I'll beat the crap out of you. So, for many reasons, the stopping power of water, political character, the cost of hegemony in the United States of America right now seems to be playing along with the system, where it recognizes the right of other powers to make demands for influence. So maybe the debating about whether this is a hegemonic or anarchical system, just recognize that the number of great powers does not always determine a specific international system. Just like, you know, the fact that you might have powerful aristocracies in a country does not preclude it becoming a democracy. The material conditions of a country do not always determine its political system. You know, if we look at material conditions, India should not be a democracy. And yet, despite all its problems, India has been functioning democratic since independence, which is a miracle. And bravo to the Indian people for being able to pull it off. So think it that way. So here's the question then, about our future. First of all, are we entering a world of bipolarity or multipolarity? Are there states that are able to rise materially to the level to challenge the United States of America? And if that happens, what will be the consequences for global governance? What will be the consequences for the current international political system? These are the questions of our time, and one problem is this. Many commentators might be unfair, but many commentators believe that the current class of politicians that are ruling the states of the world, well, they don't seem to know how to conduct diplomacy.
How did we get to the point when politicians are taking selfies at a memorial service? That's what happened at the memorial service for the great Nelson Mandela, where David Cameron, Barack Obama, and the admittedly very attractive Danish Prime Minister all took a selfie. And dear old Michelle Obama did not look pleased. How did this come about? Well, obviously it's politicians picking up on the popular culture, and it's not always a bad thing. Michelle Obama herself did it with the first dog, and they looked utterly cute and wonderful together. Other good examples, Pope Francis did it, when a group of students shoved a camera in front of his face, and he smiled in that bear-tipping way that he does. But of course, it can backfire. A good example of that would be Tom Hanks. Be careful to wear something when you take a selfie if you're of a certain age and a certain build. Also, David Cameron got caught in an accidental selfie when he was asleep on a bed, looking for all the world like a beached seal. But the important thing is context and timing. Barack Obama and David Cameron should not be taking a selfie at a memorial service, because it's a memorial service and they're not 13 years old. Instead, they should be showing respect and concentrating on what's going on. And frankly, Michelle Obama's look pretty much spoke for all of us.
So, there is an argument and a fear by many commentators and scholars that the people who are supposed to manage these massive questions, these issues over here, okay, we're going to look over, are incompetent. Now, part of this argument is racist, and part of it is classist. Kissinger says these people don't know diplomacy because they're not like the old aristocratic European aristocracies and bureaucracies. You know, back before World War I, if you wanted to become the minister of foreign affairs of a country, even a democracy like Great Britain, not everybody could become. Not you had a pedigree, you had a name, like Charles Asquith V or something like that, or Helmut von Hohenberg, or Konrad von Hohenberg, or de Grazia, a name, an aristocratic name. And usually your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather had also served the government. There was this feeling that your family's goal was to serve the state. And there was this culture of aristocratic service, and all of these diplomats were part of it. So in a way, despite the fact that one was a Greek, the other one was a Turk, the other one was an Italian, they all spoke the same language, French, because La French was the diplomatic language, and they all behaved the same way. They could understand each other's way of thinking, and that helped them manage the system. Of course, the answer to that is these people brought us World War I and World War II. So maybe the idiots we have today are not that bad. Partly that was like, oh, these new countries, they don't have the history of European countries, they don't know how to balance and everything, because Europeans were busy killing each other for 500 years. They learned how to kill each other in civilized ways and avoid killing each other over small things. Well, there's bad classicist, bad racist there. But I'm not going to say that there's not some truth that some of the people making decisions, like a certain president in a certain big country, don't play by the rules. And maybe some people, like the National Review magazine, say, yeah, we got a president who doesn't play by the rules. Rules suck, man! USA! 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 And maybe it works out for the time being. The American economy is doing very well, I guess because they are costing a lot of money to China. But there is such a thing in politics as long-term consequences. And a lot of those old diplomats, exactly because their families have existed for 500 or 1,000 years, tended to think about the long term, even if they pretty much mucked it all up in World War I. And the questions are big. According to Kissinger, the problem of today's world is that the majority of great powers and potential major powers, the majority of the potential poles of the system, don't have an experience with what he calls the classical balance of power system. Let's look at America. If you look at the United States of America in the 19th century and early 20th century, there's no balance of power in North America. The Yankees beat the crap out of everybody. Mexicans, they make an agreement with the English and scare them. Then they beat each other up, but beat the ones who wanted independence. Then they go and beat up the Caribbean states. Central America. America has a history of dominance, of not being treated as an equal, but being on the top. And then it dominated Europe. In the Cold War era, the United States had dominance in Western Europe. Russia, according to Kissinger, doesn't know what role it wants to play in the world, doesn't want to balance America, or doesn't want to create a new hegemony in Eurasia. Eurasianists, maybe with a new czar of all the Eurasias. It's politically unstable. At some point, Vladimir Putin is going to die. I know he does very good working out, judo, runs half naked in the snow, rides horses, fishes, sings. He does everything essentially, but he's gonna die at some point. And no one has any freaking idea of what's gonna follow, which is also an issue with a president of another country, but I'm not saying the name. Okay? China, until the 1970s, China was either in its own world, in living hell of continuous non-stop civil war and foreign intervention, in its own world under Mao. Only recently have Chinese politicians become part of the world system. Very recently. So no one knows how the Chinese are going to react to a world of multiple polarity and global demands. India, according to Kissinger, is still caught up on the idea of post-colonial narratives. We are going to get even with the Europeans for imperialism, yeah! And resolving the issues that arose from that colonialism. The European states, according to him, are diminished in power and they're all focused on the EU. So, his question is, how will order be maintained in the 21st century, especially when we're dealing with all of these people? Again, there's an element of racism here. Oh, all these young countries, and ageism a bit. It's like me going to say like, you young people, what do you know? How are you going to rule the world? Oh, we're all doomed. We're all this selfie picture in the texting all the time. Oh my God. When I was your age, I was reading. There's a bit of that there, so it might be a bit unfair. But the question still remains. Who's gonna get what, when and how? Well, to be able to answer that question, one thing we can do is we can look at the back. We can look in the past. We can try and see how was order attained and maintained in the international system initially. This is the goal of this class, okay? Fundamentally, in this class, we're not making any argument that Europeans were some kind of magical thing, okay? Europe, as you're going to see, was pretty much a very bad place to live in the 17th century, okay? Somehow that changed, and that change had a big effect. And that's what we're going to learn here. How did the European system arise, how it became global, and how did it transform to a world system? And maybe that will help us understand our future. Or maybe not. At the very least, I promise you a lot of fun and learning about crazy people with a lot of power.